Hey guys, I'm Martin Cliffe and welcome to Martin's Monday pedal playthrough. In this series I take some of the pedals that are in my collection that aren't on my current pedal boards and play them with some more conventional sounding instruments so that you can get a feel for them. And hopefully as I come to sell them, I've then got video demos for them as well. So a few weeks ago we looked at the version 2 of the 3-leaf audio Proton envelope filter, and that pedal had 3 knobs and 2 switches. It had gain, peak, decay, and then a range switch and a sweep switch. The version 3 is slightly different in that it has an extra tone knob instead of the range control. But essentially the controls otherwise are the same. There's a peak control, a gain control, a decay, and there's a sweep switch, which again in the up position does what you'd expect, and in the down position does some very strange things, or not a whole lot. So the way I've got it set, I'm just playing my American Special Fender jazz bass with the neck pickup all the way up, the bridge pickup not quite all the way up, just to avoid that out of phase sound. Clean tone. So it's got a really kind of quacky tone. I think in some ways I prefer the version 2, but this has tones that are pretty cool on it as well. If we take all the knobs to 12 o'clock. So again, the gain control is kind of like the threshold. It's pretty responsive. So if you want it to trigger even if you play really softly, you turn it up. This is not a particularly powerful bass. And if you want it to only trigger on the really loudest notes, turn it all the way down. And most of the time you get that kind of dubby subtone. I have to play really quite hard to trigger it at that setting. So really beyond, with this bass at least, which is quite a low output, below sort of 9 o'clock, it's not doing very much. Then the peak control controls how much of a kind of attack you get. So all the way up. It's really sort of harsh. Very kind of analog synth-esque. Take it down a little bit, a bit more subtle. And as you take it down, it just has less and less effect. To the point where it sounds more like you're just opening and closing a tone control all the way down. So it's pretty usable across its whole range. It depends on the kind of tone you're looking for, which is a sign of a good envelope filter, I guess. I think the Protons, the 3-leaf audio pedals, are built kind of to mimic the classic Mutron envelope filters, but I'm not 100% certain on that. Decay controls how long the filter stays open, so all the way down, closes very quickly. So you probably want it lower for kind of slap funk. And if you're playing something slower, you want it to stay open a long way, maybe you crank it around. So this is all with the sweep knob in the up position. If we take the sweep knob down, then the harder you pick, the more closed the filter is. Which I guess if you're trying to simulate certain synth sounds, that kind of is useful. It's not something I could imagine myself playing too often. That's kind of what I expect an envelope filter to do. And the tone control seems to affect more the kind of bottom of the... so when the filter's closed, it's not quite as closed with the tone control all the way up. And with the tone control all the way down, it's then affecting the, it's much more kind of bassy and mellow with the filter closed. But with the filter open, you still, that's what the peak control is controlling. So I guess with the tone all the way down and the peak all the way up, you're going to get your biggest extreme. And then with the peak all the way down and the tone all the way up, you'll get your most subtle settings. So it's a really flexible pedal. Let's hear it with the P bass with flat wounds just to give it a different tone and a much higher output bass. Now the one thing about this bass is it's a lot louder than the jazz bass. It's still just an American special with DiMarzio pickups, but it just seems to put out a lot more output. Maybe typical of P basses, I don't know. It's the only one I've ever owned actually. So let's take everything back to 12 o'clock. So I'd probably want on this bass to take the gain control down a little bit just so it's not triggering quite so easily. And at that point, it's much easier then to get those kind of little runs, particularly because the flat wounds are naturally darker strings, so you can get those little sort of passing notes that don't trigger the filter. With the tone control roll all the way down on the bass, that's giving again another really versatile tone. And if I take the volume down on the bass, then it's just going to make it less kind of responsive, I guess. So the main difference with this pedal between compared with the version 2 is the addition of that tone control. Rather than just having the range switch, it gives you much more flexibility in terms of how much you want when the filter is closed, how much brightness you want on that tone, which is really useful. Yeah, I've used this pedal more actually for guitar, I think, than for bass, but it definitely has a lot of flexibility, particularly if you're playing a range of different basses and you want a whole load of different options. So definitely one to look out for. I'm pretty sure there's a version 4 out now. I'm not sure what the difference is other than the paint job, but Spencer at 3leaf Audio does seem to update stuff quite often to make stuff suit the tone he hears in his head, I guess. So very cool company. Make some great sounding bass pedals. Check them out.